very good question, and it was posed to me by the pitch. This again, I'm just going to go right at it. There's a debate out there whether or not we should go from the village manager's position back to the administrative form of government. My answer is no. We must stay on our current track. How much power should be divided? Well, again, that's up to our village president, who sets the tone for our village. And our village manager currently is doing a very good job. But again, we cannot take a step back a decade ago. We are not that town of 5,000 people. We are a town of almost 20,000 people. And how much power, and that could all be debated. But again, I think that's also an issue that we need to include our residents on. Because all of you are here tonight because you care about the town. And we're up here tonight because we all care about the town as well. So again, to answer the question simply, we do not change our form of government, but we need your input on how to help run our village. Thank you.
Josh Salisbury.
Boy, this is a question that has been posed by the patch, and it's been debated time and time again since the election has started. And my position is simple. I think we need to get back to more of the trustees being in charge and get the trustee form of government and have the trustees over certain sections of the village and a village administrator reporting to the trustees, because after all, the trustees are the elected officials and we are the ones that have to answer to the people.
Robert Waterman.
This, I feel, is the most important question in this election. And I look each of you in the eye in dead seriousness. When you look at communities like Chicago and Cicero, and you look at the corruption, this is exactly what happens when you get politics involved with day-to-day operations. Whether you call it a village manager or a village administrator form of government, it's about what is the job description and what are the duties of your staff and what are the duties and oversight that the trustees have. Trustees currently are the policy makers. The day-to-day operations are run by a qualified individual with a master's degree in municipal government. An individual who has the expertise, the knowledge to keep us out of lawsuits, to make sure human resources is run legally and appropriately. We have department heads who are responsible for day-to-day operation. We have a police chief who is a professional and is a graduate of the FBI Academy. We have a director of public works that is a career servant in the municipal, in public works. He worked for the Illinois Department of Transportation. What I'm getting at is we have professionals that make sure things are responsive. If you get trustees running each of these departments, if I tell the police chief, hey, he has to get over to the east side and take care of a situation, and then another trustee calls him up and say, hey, you need to go over to the west side, take care of this right now, it's going to be chaos. You're going to see a lot of problems that grow out of it. That form of government is nothing but chest pounding for certain trustees that can say, hey, I got that pothole fixed for you, or hey, I got that done for you. Let the professionals do the job.
Thank you. Stan Bond.
My understanding is that there are two forms of local government in Illinois. Our government form hasn't changed. We do not have a village manager form of government. That requires a referendum from the public, which I cannot find that we have. So what we really still have is a trustee form of government, and what we apparently have not done is clearly define what are the duties of our village administrator and what duties does the board want to reserve to itself. Let me give you a couple of examples of why we're having some issues on this, because I believe that structure hasn't been well defined. It should have been defined in an ordinance that clearly laid out which entity is responsible for which activities. In December, a decision was made to use what was described as a surplus and sales tax revenue for staff compensation. And without even discussing the merits of doing that, my concern is that that might have come to the board, especially in an economy and a budget situation like we're in, what is the pleasure of the board? We have some extra funds. Should we save it? Should we use it for staff? Should we use it for another police vehicle? There's where the elected officials need to have more of a voice. Similar situation, perhaps in deciding to fill a vacant position as a result of a resignation in January. Under the current economic conditions and with the budget that we're facing, maybe we go to the board and say we have a staff vacancy. Should we ride with that vacancy for a few months, or should we fill it now? So I think what we need is to define those roles a little better and eliminate some of the friction that's resulting from not having clearly defined roles. But we have not changed our form of government. We still have a trustee form of government.
Matt Bromley.
I answered this question the other day. If you would ask me to revert back to the way we did things 10 years ago, I would say absolutely not. And here are my reasons for that. We have hired, and the board has hired, the residents, I guess, had hired a village manager a few years ago, 10 years ago. And that person is in charge of the day-to-day operations of this community. The board sets the policies, that's my understanding. And there is a village manager ordinance that you can look up if you like, that does lay out the responsibilities there. And the other thing that I would like to mention, that it's my understanding that if there is not currently funding for a position, that the village manager could then just hire somebody at will. Thanks.
Okay. And G. Fell.
Again, just to reiterate what I think most of them have said here is I also am 100% in favor of staying with the village manager position as we currently have it. As Matt said, we do have an ordinance outlining what her responsibilities or that position's responsibilities are. I don't think that any of us on the board can honestly sit back and say that we have the knowledge or the expertise to deal with the day-to-day operations of the village of Montgomery. We need a position that can keep us, as Rob said, out of lawsuits. Just as an example, at our committee of the whole meeting Tuesday night, we got an update on some personnel issues that have to be revisited. There were 14 new federal and state laws and regulations that had to be addressed. I mean, that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort for one individual to have to stay on top of all of that. And I think, we're doing the village an injustice by not having the best qualified people out there that can do this, because we would end up with lawsuits, and that's going to ultimately cost taxpayers the additional money. As far as filling positions, there is excellent communication between our current village manager or that position and the board. Anytime a position comes up, the position that was referred to in January, the board was made aware of that, and the board did have a chance to talk about that position. And again, I just don't think that we can afford to take a step back. Things are not the way they were when we were 5,000 people and we're 18,000 now.